with the internet, you can decentralize information, but with Bitcoin, with crypto, you can decentralize trust. And that was the most exciting thing that got me to get involved in this as I started thinking about where the space was going. And then DAOs, seemed to be the new kind of organization that could emerge out of this decentralized world where you didn't have to have the same centralized configuration and management controls, but you could still have a group of people come together to make decisions and to share that decision making in a way that was, attributable via on-chain provenance.
Welcome to the SquiggleDAO podcast. My name is Jared, and online you can find me on Twitter at Jared_pause. I'm the founder of the 8NAP Digital Asset Fund, the generative art platform 8NAP Art, and an avid admirer of the Chromie Squiggle.
And I'm Nifty. I lead finance, acquisitions, and NFT DeFi for SquiggleDAO, and I'm another huge fan of Squiggles. Our guest today is Jonas Lamis. Jonas is currently leading PlayLayer.xyz, an app that allows creators and brands to publish 3D assets and share them via AR. He's a member of the top DAOs and communities in the space, to name a few: Flamingo, Neon, Neptune, Proof, Quantum, and SquiggleDAO. It's an honor to have him with us today. Jonas, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. Love the work you guys are doing and happy to add my 2 cents.
So first question, we always do a lot of research and try to dig deeper into the background of our guests. Hopefully we don't get it wrong, but sources say that you have a long history of traditional art background.
Yes, in fact, the sources are correct. I grew up in an artistic family. My father was a noted sculptor in the 1960s and 1970s, part of the op art movement, which was kind of a branch of contemporary art at the time. The cube that you see behind me, this plexiglass orange and white cube, was the kind of work that he was known for. And so when I was a little boy, he was famously showing his work around the world in museums and galleries and things like that. And so I got to follow along on all those visits, and I ended up being really uninterested in art as I became a teenager, as you always try to avoid whatever your parents are up to. So I finally made it back into it through the world of Squiggles and other collections in the NFT space.
It's funny how everything comes full circle at the end of the day. Was there any interesting insight that growing up in hindsight, looking back from your dad, that maybe is applicable today in your current journey?
Well, one of the most interesting things that has been an outcome of dad being an artist, I think may be more applicable to the art community than to the collector community, but he was part of a cohort of artists who were all kind of working in New York or working around the world at the same time, and kind of showed at the same galleries and we're part of some of the same kind of early collections of contemporary mid-century art. And as a byproduct of that, one of the things that those artists did when they were all kind of getting started is they ended up trading pieces with each other. As a result of that, my house has a bunch of contemporary art in it that I was lucky to inherit when my parents passed away. And so I think that the lesson there is we have a similar kind of cohort that has occurred in Web3 over the last year or two, and even before that, obviously. But I would advise all of the artists out there to take time to make some trades with their contemporaries. You never know which ones are going to be the breakouts at 10, 20, 30 years from now, and which ones are just going to be cool because they look good.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about this space in particular is you see all of the artists either collecting their own work or others' work. I mean, some of the best collections I've seen outside of DAOs and other things are actually some artists. I mean, their eye is just natural, and it draws to some of these great pieces. Thomas Lynn Peterson's a great one that comes to mind. So let's take a step back. Your journey into crypto, can you share with us what that looked like for you?
In late 2016, I had co-founded a startup in 2013 that was actually very early in kind of the AI tooling space, and too early, unfortunately, I guess, for today's mania. But the company was essentially acqui-hired in 2016, and coming out of that, I was looking around for what did I miss over the last 3 or 4 years when I was busy doing this startup. I had very little knowledge about the emerging crypto space at the time. And so I started reading some white papers in kind of mid 2016, late 2016, saw what a few of the investors were investing in kind of out here in Silicon Valley. And I got really excited about crypto, but in particular, I got really excited about this notion of proof of stake, which at the time Ethereum was proof of work, obviously, and Bitcoin as well. And so I started reading all the proof of stake white papers, which led to me getting kind of fairly actively involved in the ICO summer that happened in 2017. The one that I was most enamored with was Tezos. And so, I participated in that ICO as well as a few of the other ones. Got involved in kind of the community building on the Tezos side and some of the unfortunate ugliness that happened around kind of the fallout between the original kind of founding team. But at the end of the day, my first real venture in the crypto space was building a validator in the Tezos ecosystem. And so enjoyed doing that for a while, as well as learning about other proof of stake tokens. I really didn't come around to Ethereum until kind of early 2020, and we can talk about that as the time goes.
No, it's one of the things I've admired about a lot of the builders that we're interviewing is you guys are actionable, meaning like it's cool to see that you are working on a validator, rolling up your sleeves and figuring it out. So that's really fun to see that it's not just collecting, but really understanding the mechanics of all the systems involved.
Yeah, one of the lessons that I'm learning across these few episodes is that everyone is tinkering with new technologies, new things. So trying the thing is what makes the difference and what makes you understand deeper the technology. So I'm going to start tinkering even more. One a question that I always like to ask you is that you've been involved since very early on lots of DAOs. I remember when your bio was DAOs all the way. So, what was your rationale at the time so early to join in all the DAOs and all the top DAOs?
Yeah, I think that I saw the DAO model as a really interesting evolution of kind of traditional business models. I feel like, the kind of the long arc of societal evolution had led us to kind of mid 20th century peak centralization. The Industrial Revolution, all these big companies that needed to assemble in order to be able to produce global products, and global organizations fell out of that. And, the Moon Project and huge governments and things like that, that was all kind of crescendoing in kind of the mid 20th century. And then when the internet came out, I was fortunate to be kind of in high school and in college when the early internet started materializing and the first companies started coming out, Netflix started coming out and things like that. You could see what a emancipating technology it was to combat against the peak centralization that existed at that point in time. And so when you fast forward that into, the Bitcoin white paper in 2009, 2010, suddenly you realize that there's this new technology that completes the cycle of decentralized capabilities. With the internet, you can decentralize information, but with Bitcoin, with crypto, you can decentralize trust. And that was the most exciting thing that got me to get involved in this as I started thinking about where the space was going. And then DAOs, seemed to be the new kind of organization that could emerge out of this decentralized world, where you didn't have to have the same centralized configuration and management controls, but you could still have a group of people come together to make decisions and to share that decision making in a way that was attributable via on-chain provenance. And so I really loved the DAO model when I saw it. And in fact, Tezos, in my opinion, was kind of, I always thought of it as kind of the first really big DAO that was functional, because with proof of stake, you have this notion of delegating your tokens to your baker, and your baker is responsible for both submitting proposals that change the blockchain as well as voting for proposals that upgrade the ecosystem. And it is very much a DAO model at scale. And so, I experimented with things in the Tezos ecosystem early on the DAO side. And then when I discovered what Tribute Labs was doing with NFT DAOs, I went kind of all in on that early on.
And you discovered Squiggles via those DAOs?
I did. I was fortunate in kind of the fall of 2020 to be speaking at the Consensus conference that year. And it was all because of COVID. It was all virtual, and I was on a DAO panel where I was talking about some of the things we were doing in the Tezos ecosystem. Priyanka Desai was on the panel as well, and she's one of the co-founders of Tribute Labs that runs Flamingo, among other things, in the LAO. And she was talking about what they had done with the LAO as far as creating an on-chain investor fund at Tribute. And then she kind of also started talking about how that group of DAO members were starting to investigate other areas to launch new DAOs in, and that the NFT space was one that they had decided to get started with. And they were creating this new entity called Flamingo that was going to collect NFTs in a DAO model. And when I heard about that, I was like, that sounds like a group I want to be a part of. So I just kind of jumped in, YOLO'd into that without knowing much about Ethereum or about the group. And that then led to all the squiggliness to come.
It's a heck of a YOLO, man. It's pretty impressive.
Sometimes you get lucky.
No. Don't
sure.
discount what you're capable of. I in getting to know you, I did appreciate that. You're one to experiment and poke around, and I think your experience with DAOs, and then also your business acumen from building things in the past. That's one of the things that I recognize is finding good founders, good people, and aligning yourself with them. It seems pretty logical that a lot of your history kind of lined up for that moment, at least my observation. But yeah, it's cool to see that. So you're involved with all these DAOs. You started a few yourself. What led you to decide to start the SquiggleDAO?
I went back in the Flamingo Discord in preparation for this conversation to see when we first started talking about squiggles in the Discord, and the first the first mention that I found in the Discord about art blocks was at 9:02 a.m. on the 27th of November in 2020, which was basically the day that it launched. One of the members had found the link and shared it and was like, "This looks really interesting." Our good friend Quick Rider, who we all know in the DAO, who is a massive Squiggle proponent, made a comment right after that where he said, well, that construction token looks like the thing that's most interesting. We really should try and collect that construction token. And so we were laughing about that on Discord today. I shared with him that note, and he was like, yeah, it took me a little while to warm up to Squiggles. And in fact, he noted that he really hadn't collected any day ones. And I'm not sure that we collected any day ones at all in the DAO at that point in time. We were still early in trying to come up with the thesis of how we're going to collect. My first comment about Squiggles, and I guess when I first recognized it as an opportunity, was on the 30th of November, a couple days later, and I suggested to the DAO that we buy 30 Squiggles. They were $20 each at the time, and I thought that was a pretty hefty investment for us to make. And so there were a number of DAO members who really got it and were really understood that there was a collectible strategy around this thing, even though it was some silly looking squiggly line that had no provenance, no reason to think that it was going to be fine art someday at the time. But what it did have was it had a model associated with it, a rarity model, a trait model associated with it that certain members in the DAO found very familiar. And as an aside on this, I was never a set builder or collector growing up. I didn't go after all the baseball cards. I didn't go after Pokemon was probably a little bit after my time as being a young kid, but I was not. My brain didn't work about trying to collect things in sets, and so that was never like a thesis for me, essentially, as growing up. And so, CryptoPunks was not something that I was aware of. I never minted a CryptoPunk or anything like that. And so when the guys in the DAO were starting to talk about Squiggles and I think Akira probably published the first illustration of the different types of Squiggles that were out there. I didn't really pay all that much attention to it because it wasn't part of the thing that was triggering things in my mind. I was like the business guy. I'm like, I love the DAO model. I love this shared decision making model, all that kind of stuff. I wasn't like the collector. And so, kudos to the members of Flamingo and outside of Flamingo who figured that out early on and went deep and broad on their collection bases. That certainly was not me. But what did happen is that I met Eric pretty early on in that process. He actually joined Flamingo DAO shortly after that. And so I got to know him as a person, and I got to know the project, and I got to understand the vision of art blocks in general. With the the Squiggle being kind of the seminal representation of art blocks at that point in time, I got very excited about it as a business concept. And so word came to the DAO that there was a group of Squiggle collectors who were interested in forming a new DAO around that conceptually. I was very much interested in the business aspects of that. I was interested in kind of how are we going to make decisions around that? What kind of decisions would we want to make? How would we manage ownership of any assets? How would we create, how would we actually create a shared repository of Squiggles? Is that even possible? Of course, at the time, Squiggles were still minting, and so it wasn't nearly the reach to ask people to donate one. And so for me, the Squiggle team that came together, I was by no means the founder of it or the idea person behind it. I was like the guy who said, yeah, I can help us get this started from a structural perspective and an organizational perspective. And that's how I got involved.
Was this one of the first DAOs then around a specific piece of art or like NFTs to your knowledge, correct? Which I think is a really interesting deviation from I'll call it the standard DAO model, but to really have like a focused target of a specific piece of art.
I may be missing something, but yeah, I think it's the first one that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and it's really cool that you being an executor on the DAO setup, were able to find your way into this. It's, to me, listening to you talk, there's a couple things that I extract from this. Is one, you don't fit the quote unquote typical model of a collector, so to speak, right? Like, and I think that that's important to highlight, meaning a lot of people with different skill sets and interests in this space have been able to contribute on their own terms. So I really, really love like your story and appreciate you sharing it, because I think that this space is full of so many people who are capable of contributing, and that contribution is really advancing the space overall for setting up a great foundation and ones that are reliable and trustworthy. So that's super cool to hear about all of that DAO experience.
what was going on in Flamingo behind the scenes. I think it's a history lesson for the Squiggle and Flamingo and NFT fans. And I think that's the beauty of DAOs as well. If you put the right people in the same room, great things are going to come out those decisions, or should come out those decisions. So I think that's the power of DAOs. Do you have a favorite Squiggle memory?
I think the most fun Squiggle thing I've done is when the NFT NYC conference was happening in New York in the fall of 2021. So we're like a year after the launch of Art Blocks, essentially. I think it was maybe the beginning of November 2021. I applied to a speaking slot for that to do a talk called WTF is SquiggleDAO, right? And they picked that up. And in order to really make lighthearted draw lighthearted attention to it, I crafted a Squiggle costume, which I made out of rainbow play tubes that little children crawl through when they're, in their living room and they need one of those, like, nylon kind of like a tunnel thing. And so I created a Squiggle costume out of that, and I wore that on stage when I was doing the WTF is SquiggleDAO talk. I'm not sure if that got us members or scared people away from SquiggleDAO, but it was a lot of fun. And then we had a party later that night, and there's a good picture of Eric and I on the dance floor with the Squiggle costume. So
It shows the enthusiasm in the community around the Squiggle. So if you scared away people, it's probably for the right reasons, and if you onboarded them, it's probably for the right reasons also.
Yeah, I think my insight early on was the Squiggle was like the perfect combination of entertainment and business and cultural relevancy for, it is the right culturally relevant motif for this era, for early NFT collecting era, in my opinion.
So that means you were early to see the vision of the Squiggle, right? So where do you see the future of the Squiggle? If you could see the future, put on your VR goggles, like where do we go next?
Right. Well, that might mean that there's some good news and some bad news to talk about the future of the Squiggle, I guess. Certainly, I don't think there's bad news related to squiggliness per se, or the Squiggle per se, but I do think that the NFT market in general is going to change massively over the next couple of years versus this kind of early and unsustainable model that we've had between 2019 and 2022. Essentially, I think we're about to shift into a different area for NFTs in general, and I think that we're going to kind of see the future of NFTs kind of dividing into three areas. In my mind, there's going to be the true art area, in which case, a handful of collections, I think, are going to sustain and grow as being accepted by the traditional art world as being culturally relevant, massive collections of art, and some of the creators are going to continue along that path. Some of the creators are going to continue to create things, and I have no doubt that 30 years from now, a number of collections, including the Squiggle collection, are going to be seen as, first tier blue chip culturally relevant artworks, just alongside the top artworks of the last 100 years. And so for Squiggles in particular, I personally think that's where that's going. There's just so many reasons why it's gonna elevate itself to that level. I think there's another set of NFTs that are going to really, many of them are just going to go away. They were overhyped, interesting, shiny things that we all got excited about during this early phase, and there won't be a way to sustain that excitement for so many things forever. But then I do think that really where NFTs are going to go over the next next 10 years in general, the reason why NFTs need to exist besides the art world is that they need to exist. They need to exist for digital provenance purposes. The concept of the NFT is super important to be able to tie a digital asset that you want to own with the creator, with the chain of custody, and with the proof that it is the real thing as opposed to a copy of the real thing. And that copy of a real thing is really hard when it comes to digital assets, and that's what makes crypto so important and NFTs so relevant for where the future is going. Because in my current startup that I'm working on that is in the augmented reality space, we have an opportunity to play with things like this new Apple Vision Pro headset that's coming out. And it's very obvious to me, although it may be non-intuitive to a lot of people, but it's completely obvious to me that we are moving towards this world of digital assets becoming first-class assets that will live alongside physical assets and will be equally of value to many people in many scenarios. And digital assets have a lot of benefit associated to owning a physical asset going forward. But one of the problems is they need to be, you need to have provable ownership. You need to have provenance. You need to have immutability to the elements that you want to make immutable. And that is where blockchain is really going to shine over the next decade. So that's the good news and the bad news related to NFTs.
Well, you say obvious, and it's obvious to you. What are maybe a couple bullet points for the listenership as to why it's so obvious to you?
I think that we've seen other forms of media and other forms of asset ownership move from physical to digital. I'm sure when the first MP3 came out back in the day, people thought that was stupid. Why would you want to give up your CDs? Why would you want to give up your records? Certainly, I remember getting on Napster early on and stealing all the MP3s I could find. And so that went through kind of the hype cycle, if you will, and then materialized as something that is obviously, let me say, a superior, platform, or at least a more efficient platform for most people, right? And digital books, a very similar kind of thing. And I think that more and more as we move into a world where the tech vendors, for better or worse, are going to be convincing us to buy tools that provide kind of this persistent access to the digital world through headsets, through glasses, through contact lenses, through Neuralink direct embed in your brain 30 years from now, 40 years from now, however long that takes, 10 years from now, who knows? It just means that the natural set of products that are going to support those technologies are digital products. And many of the things that we treat as physical products today can be made digital. And if that's going to happen, there's going to have to be ways to own those things just like you own the physical things today. And that means we either have to wrest all that ownership rights into digital rights management run by big corporations, or we're going to do it through, more decentralized blockchain-based models. And everything seems to me to indicate that society is headed towards more decentralization from peak centralization, as we talked about earlier. So that's how I put the pieces together in my head.
It makes sense. It's accessibility, right? Like before you had to go down and get an 8-track or a CD to play music, and now it's at our fingertips. And it's I agree with you. It's logical that we start to transition into more digitally accessible art, specifically since we're talking about the Chromie Squiggle. I mean, instead of having to go to a gallery or a museum or something to view and access it, it's just the barrier to entry and the friction is just it's so far reduced. It makes so much sense for a widespread and greater adoption.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how much time you've spent looking in the AI space these days, the notion of having intelligent agents that are your friends that are doing your bidding for you That's coming on strong, right? And then having like AI based companionship, it's like it or not, it's around the corner. Be it just for conversational or who knows where the world's going in that sense. But when you take the AI stuff, the generative AI and intelligence that's emerging there, and you couple it with kind of the VR stuff and the ability to have persistent companions or pets or whatever it ends up being that are being fed from the AI and they're being, put into your real world. That's where the blockchain piece needs to plug into also. If you don't plug the blockchain into that stool, then you get much more of a dystopian outcome. So that's how that's all going to come together.
100% agree, and a bit scary as well, if you ask me, the AI and those companions. One question before closing on Squiggles, if you are open to it, could you explain how Squiggles help you make a big financial personal
I'd be
purchase?
happy to. Sure. Sure. I know we talked, Nifty has been very helpful in understanding the Squiggle lending market. It's something that SquiggleDAO has been a pioneer of here, along working with platforms like NFTFi. Is that how you say it? Or NiftyFi? NFTFi, I think. And others. There's Zarda, for example, which is supporting some of the upcoming events that we're doing. There's a number of these platforms that are emerging in the NFT lending space, which is really interesting. But I earlier this year, my family, we decided we wanted to buy a new house, and a lot of my net worth at the moment is tied up in illiquid JPEGs, as they say. And so I decided, let me use, I think I used 4 of my Squiggles, and I took out loans against those Squiggles. And those are like a year-long loan. And I think the interest rate is somewhere around 9%, if I'm not mistaken, on those. And, it was about 60 to 70% of kind of the asset value that was available. And I took that ETH, converted it to USDC, sent it to Coinbase, turned it into USD, sent it to my bank account, and used it to, be part of the down payment for the house that we bought. So now the challenge is, of course, I have to get those out of hock next year when they come due, or at least refinance them at that point in time. But it was very useful to be able to leverage some of the early investments to get a tangible item that was important to us.
And it's a whole nother unlock to the financialization of these assets. And it's a testament to the desirability from lending institutions to even give it the confirmation that it's an amazing asset to lend against. So it's cool to see on every front. One of the things that, in addition to the Squiggle being amazing, I think it's unanimous to say that Eric, the creator behind the Squiggle, Snowfro, is absolutely amazing, one of a kind, true, brilliant individual. Is there any specific quality to Snowfro that you found yourself drawn to more than others? I mean, I'm sure there's a laundry list of these, but
yeah, for sure,
you're going to twist your arm and narrow it down to just a few.
Well, yeah, there are. I've been fortunate to be able to, have talk with Eric a lot and have a few, face-to-face get-togethers and share tequila and Negroni every so often with him. And I would say that a lot of people talk about his kindness, how much of a kind leader he is, and I think that's absolutely true. But for me, I think it's more about it's definitely about that. But if I had to pick another area that is important to me, I think it is his vision for set creation that is really interesting and is what has made art blocks as relevant as it is. because Eric was very early in CryptoPunks. I think he minted many CryptoPunks early on and understood, the set creation in the CryptoPunk space. And then he also had his own business, and I think he was thinking about the tile world that he was a part of, and sets in the tile space, which I think then all of that came together into his design for the Squiggle. And then he realized that as a builder, he could build a platform around set creation concepts that took advantage of the best things that Ethereum had to offer, such as the on-chain provenance, and pulled that all together as a visionary. So that's what I would vote for.
You've mentioned that you've spent some time with him digitally and in person. Was there a specific moment when you realized that Snowfro was someone special?
I was really early on, as we were just chatting in Flamingo. I realized he was, a student of contemporary art space and was starting to collect in that space. And so we had a really nice opportunity for him to collect one of my dad's pieces of art, one of these cubes. I don't know how much of this story I should tell, but that cube has at least traditionally been on display down at the Marfa Gallery, the Marfa House. I'm sure it probably has been moved around in the last year, but it's nice to see it down there. But I think what was funny, the going back to my understanding of Snowfro as a set creator and a set strategist, like I flew to Houston to give him the piece from where it was, and we met at the airport, and he had just gotten in a car wreck on the way to the airport to come meet me and pick up the piece. But although he had just been in this kind of rather traumatic car wreck, the only thing he could think about was the Meebits mint, because it was happening that day. And all he wanted to talk about was the Meebits mint and the Meebits rarity traits that were emerging and the different types of Meebits and stuff like this. And that was all over my head because I was, not all that deep in the CryptoPunk space. But that was kind of one of my favorite memories of seeing how his brain works.
It's it's to me just a reaffirmation that Eric's a collector of everything and an appreciator of all art. It's really cool that you shared that story, and it's a really cool bond, I think, that you're able to share with him, sharing your father's art. It just, I don't know, it just gives me even more conviction of this space, because it's everybody's so thoughtful and heartfelt. I really love to see this sort of thing emerging, and it's just a testament to the kindness and the brilliance of everybody. But again, I'm very forward looking, and it's like, what do you think? You mentioned Snow's kindness, you mentioned the set collecting and building. Like, is there something that you see for the legacy of Snow? Like, what do you think his legacy will be when we're all looking back on this, listening to it 20 years from now, and sharing that tequila like you talk about?
Yeah. I think I would probably just reemphasize that I think he's going to have kind of a two-part legacy. One being the art that he's created, because I do think that Squiggles will become kind of a first class, blue chip collection into the indefinite future. Probably some of his other works that he's done will also resonate, quite a bit with collectors over time. But the real, main legacy, I think, is going to be as kind of the, it's going to be as the builder of the system that created the foundation for the most relevant mid 2020 NFT collections in the art world. And so that, I think it's, building art blocks in a way that allows people to have all the right emotions and experiences when collecting things, and pulling in the set models is really what's most important.
art blocks is one of the largest unlocks in order to get that mass adoption. And I mean, I don't think it can be understated. The brilliance behind it and his ability to see around corners and have that foresight for not only collectability but scalability. I mean, you talked about NFC or NFT NYC earlier, and to see some of the art blocks pieces scale onto a 3-story screen. I mean, the foresight that he had with art blocks is just absolutely mind blowing. It's so inspirational. It's incredible. I mean, I'm glad you
Yeah,
tapped on that.
and I think even the more recent evolution of Art Block's engine as becoming kind of a platform to power other collector experiences through other gateways is super important as well. Like getting the core technology of on-chain provenance out to multiple chains and to multiple environments where that can happen is really relevant. And I have no insider information here, but I would, through my strategy lens, I would expect to see that kind of functionality kind of permeate through many different areas of society beyond just kind of the visual presentation of kind of art.
Jonas, we have a few minutes left. We like to end with some rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid fire, the answers don't need to be. And the first one is any squiggle or any grail that got away and the story behind that one?
I mean, all of them, basically. I had a front row seat to the early collection creation process, to the people who have hundreds and hundreds of squiggles, and I don't. So yeah, just not even paying enough attention to what it meant to collect sets.
Still, you have done really well, so nothing to worry about.
I'm not. Yeah, I think that's probably a piece of wisdom, which is, there's don't get hung up in what you missed. Just be happy with what you have and what you've collected. Yeah,
that's a really important one, especially in this space or in the market space. Thinking about I could have bought lower, so sell higher. That's crazy.
Yeah, I do. I would also, just as related to that story, I went canoeing in the Minnesota wilderness with my son for Boy Scouts during the Fidenza Mint, and when we came back, I was like, "Oh, these Fidenzas, they're so expensive. They're like 2 ETH already." And now I'm not going to buy any of this, So that's all right. Enjoyed the canoeing. So
we see some pieces of art from your father, some sculpture from their father in your background. What other NFTs or pieces of art are on your home?
Oh yeah, my house is definitely filled with art. On the NFT front, I've got a couple of Meridians right over here on the wall, and then there's a Tom Sachs Nike Perfect Rocket back there. A couple other things over here on the floor. I framed a couple of Martin Grasser's Love paintings, paintings which are from the tennis, the ATP tour. We have a couple of those on display. I think those are really pretty interesting pieces. I just framed Diptych from the Metropolis drop from Bright Moments, which we're going to put in the house down in LA. And well, a couple that I'd want to get prints of that I haven't yet. I really want to get my harvests printed. I love that collection. I want to get some Liwa's Life in West America by Rupe Renisto, some of his post photography pieces. I need to get those framed. I bought a couple of folds recently, and that collection just really excited me from the art perspective. So yeah. And then there's a ton of early art blocks, from kind of season one. Some great pieces that are a little underappreciated at the moment, but I'd love to get some physicals for those as well eventually.
I love that. And my last question, my last rapid fire, you've had tremendous success in your career. What motivates you to continue?
Well, I think I'm a very curious person. I like kind of trying to connect the dots between what we have and where the world's going. And, I think I'm absolutely convinced that everything's going to be an NFT someday. So I think that in this space in particular, we're we're going through the kind of Gartner hype cycle. I just posted something on Twitter about that yesterday, but I think things are about to get real in the NFT space, for better or worse. And so I think it's just a really, really fascinating place to keep learning.
You talk about the future, like, and we've kind of touched on it. You've been an incredible visionary, in my opinion, to be able to see. I mean, the fact that you were so early to AI, early to Flamingo and some of this NFT. You're talking about the future of NFTs being almost like a standard. I equate it to basically what ACH is now. I think NFTs will be in the future. But like, what is your vision for the space overall in the future?
The digital future that we're facing is one where both people are going, many people, maybe not, maybe younger people, are going to see digital assets as the things they want to flex. Um, just like, you know, some of the physical flexes that we have from years past. People are going to want to collect and flex digital assets.
It kind of exists already, right? I mean, like if you're in Call of Duty or familiar with video games, like the skins and all of that stuff, it's already there. Uh, you know, how do you think, other generations or other areas get onboarded?
I do think that a lot of the drivers for where the world is going nowadays, more than anything, is being pushed by the large technology companies. Um, the things that Meta builds, that Apple builds, Google builds, Tesla builds are all where a lot of people get their technology, systems that underpin the things that they value going forward. Like it or not, it's no different probably than it was 100 years ago. There were probably equivalent entities that did the same kind of thing. But I think that you can see that all of the big tech vendors are pushing towards this intersection of mixed reality and AI. So that's going to drive a lot of this digital provenance needs.
That's an interesting concept, and I know we're all advocates. I mean, this podcast is about like advocacy of specifically the Squiggle, but everything digital non-site or on-chain provenance. But it's interesting that, and I largely agree with that. That some of these larger tech companies are going to drive that adoption. It's interesting.
I mean, 6529, has been talking about the open metaverse concept for a couple of years now.
Yeah,
And I think that the true adoption curve is going to be slow, but it is inexorably going to happen eventually.
that's awesome. So, I mean, you've been largely successful in your career. I think that anybody who's listening to this can or has done some research on you can say that. I guess my question would be like, how do you define success now, and has that changed for you over the years?
Well, uh, I would caveat that I've had more than my share of failures as well. And I think the most interesting thing for me has been, being successful enough at being on the forefront of these technology waves and being successful enough there to be able to keep staying on the forefront of technology waves. And so for me, like I don't remember what my success criteria was a couple decades ago, frankly. But now I think probably the main thing for me is about like learning something new every day and trying to figure out how I can put that into practice to create some kind of value out of it.
I think that's important. I mean, you talk about we have a tendency to focus on success, but I think it's very authentic to acknowledge also some of the failures along the way, because I think it helps you learn and grow and be able to sift through opportunities. Would you think some of those failures have helped you be able to filter through these opportunities as they arise later on?
I hope so. Um, yeah, I do think a lot of each failure, indicates a good opportunity to do some retrospection of what went wrong, where you got a little too far ahead of yourself, where your grand vision was a little too grand, um, and try and diagnose why it didn't work and what you can do different next time.
Well, if we can get drinks in Marfa, I'd love to hear more about
Yeah,
that
happy
and
to. That
not
sounds
take
great.
up airtime here.
You
What's
bet.
the best advice you've gotten in the NFT space?
Definitely, it would go back to just appreciate what you've collected or what you've caught, and don't get hung up on what you've not. You know, go out and touch grass or paddle the canoe, even if you miss the fidenza. That's okay.
Yeah, Zeneca has a great quote. I don't know if it's his, but I keep attributing it to him. But he says, "In a space with infinite opportunities, you could have infinite regrets." And it has to. I keep reminding myself that anything that I lose out on is a. I mean, you could perceive it as a failure, but I look as a lesson for how to either acquire in the future or something along those ways. Because I think that is one of the downsides to this arena is you could beat yourself up infinitely if you allow yourself to. But that's a really cool advice to be able to enjoy what you do have. That's the abundance mindset. So kudos to you. Um, Jonas, I do want to wrap this up. Is there anything in particular, any closing remarks that you'd like to share with all the listenership?
Um, just personally, I'm super pleased with how SquiggleDAO has evolved. The kind of the team that's in place now and the projects that they've been executing on are really really great for the DAO, and also great for the overall ecosystem. So hats off to all you guys who are working hard to make Squiggles awesome.
Yeah, a class team. Honestly, I've had the benefit and the privilege of being able to get to know a lot of the members a little bit more than most of the community, and it's just an exceptional group of individuals. Nifty's not always the best at taking compliments, but he's absolutely been amazing on the acquisitions forefront. I mean, I've really enjoyed just talking to Nifty and the entire team, but everybody's deep knowledge of the space, but then the alignment of passion and vision. So it's I agree with you. It's been absolutely amazing.
I appreciate that.
Anybody who is interested, you can follow Jonas on Twitter. It's Jonas Jonas Lamis Lamis. Please feel free to follow SquiggleDAO on Twitter. There's a Discord. It's open to the public. If you'd like to join, there's some public sections. There's also some gated areas for everybody who's interested. But please leave a comment down below. DM any of us. I don't want to speak for Jonas, but you've been very open. DM any of us. We're always available to answer Squiggle related questions or anything. We can double click on something that maybe pinged an interest on this today. We really are committed to advancing the space. We look forward to hearing from each and every one of you, and we're really looking to improve the content, improve the experience, and as I like to say, red pill or maybe rainbow pill, a Squiggle enthusiast. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening.
Great, thanks guys.
The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only. It should not be considered as professional or financial advice. The hosts and guests are not licensed financial advisors, accountants, or lawyers. The content is based on personal experiences, opinions, and research, and its accuracy, completeness, and timeliness cannot be guaranteed.